Many things I am learning, many things that are new. I will call these things Thing 1 and Thing 2. Now, there's no way I could have done that for the entire video, but here in my first year of beekeeping, and natural beekeeping specifically, I have been learning a lot. So this is the garden hive, and it represents the second caught swarm that I have here in this first year. I put out 6 swarm traps, and so far I've caught 2, so I have a 1 in 3 success rate, I guess. And while I was transferring over this swarm into the hive, there were 2 things that I learned, or realized more about. And that was smoke and ramps. Let's do this thing. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth, the curly-haired country gal here. And again, the big picture here on the homestead is natural beekeeping, colony-raised rabbits, a self-sustainable chicken flock, growing a food forest, and all this is to be able to work towards raising 100% of our own food here. And this morning I am struck by the beauty of this morning, so I wanted to show you just a little bit of what caught my eye this morning. It's been pretty hot the past few days, and this is just a beautifully crisp and lovely morning. So good morning! Anyway, thing 1 has to do with smoke. So sooner or later I plan to make a video about lighting a smoker. Many of you probably know how to do this already, but so far I have had a terrible track record of lighting my smoker correctly, and I think I'm finally getting the hang of it now. Monty, the suburban sodbuster, gave me some tips when he was here, and I was applying them kind of incorrectly, and so here with this process, I had to relight the smoker like 3 times, but I'm finally getting better at it, so there will be a video about that coming later. Now, I've learned a lot about smoke. I thought it was pretty simple, but I was surprised on the Lay-Ins treatment-free group how much discussion there is about using it, not using it, alternatives to using it. I was surprised to see that many people don't use smoke. And then the other thing that caught my attention was that some people use particular kinds of incense instead of smoke. I mean, there's still smoke, but as an aroma to either calm the bees or kind of throw off their communicative pheromones. So I'm curious to learn more about that, and when I make that video about the smoker, I'll see what information I've gathered by then. But anyway, as I was transferring the hives over, this was the first time that I saw any melted foundation. There was one frame that had a strip of I think 3 inches of foundation that had just melted off. So that was the first time that we had seen that. And again, you can see this beautiful white comb that the bees make. That was something new to me. I thought that comb was yellow, a dark yellow right away, but it starts out pretty much white and then it gets darker and darker over time. And then eventually it's going to be kind of like a brownish black. And at that point, the bees don't really want to use it, and it's not really that useful for things except for maybe as a backup. But as you can see in this hive, I mentioned this in my previous video, compared to the first caught swarm, this caught swarm was heavy. And if you can see on here, there's tons of bees. They're already building out the frames really nicely. So this has been a really strong hive. So after I removed the frames and took a peek inside the swarm trap, I went ahead and just shook out the rest of the bees and set down the swarm trap so that they could all find their way back to their new home. So basically what I learned in this experience is that I needed to get better at using smoke, which I have been doing. Hey you, yeah you, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this, can you like it down below? Thanks. It leads me to thing 2, which is using a ramp when you're transferring a swarm into a hive. So, Dr. Leo recommends, and I'm sure many others do, to use just a sheet of plywood for the bees to make their way up to the hive. And I was just thinking, well, all they need is a ramp, so I'm just going to use the lid of the swarm trap inside out. And what I saw was that they would, as you can see, I waited and waited, and they would move up, but then they would get kind of stuck where the cross beams are, I guess. And I just expected them to climb over and keep going. but they didn't seem to be doing that. I think they maybe would have made it eventually, most of them, but it was moving slower than I expected. And now, knowing what I know now, that makes more sense because I was looking into doing a split. And I've been doing a tiny bit of research about a Terranova split. And it sounds like the idea for that is that you put a ramp up to the hive, but you intentionally leave a gap. And then the idea is that the younger bees can't or won't make the jump or the flight to the hive, and they actually stay there and kind of form their own little artificial swarm or cluster underneath whatever ramp it is you're using. And I forget if the queen is with them or in the hive or if it matters, but with that in mind, it makes me think that these bees that are getting stuck on the ramp, on my makeshift ramp, are maybe the younger bees that don't fly as well or are not quite sure how to get to the hive. So finally, I didn't know that then, but finally I thought, I need to change something. So I put a box there, and I thought, oh, this is going to work way better. But the edge of this box is, 4 or 5 inches thick. And so again, what I saw is that they would get to the top of the box, and maybe they would have all made it eventually. But I waited and waited, and you can see me waiting and waiting. And then it just didn't seem like they were able to make it across. So then I tried to put this stick across, and finally with that, they were like, oh, okay. So they were able to climb on the stick and then get into their home. So, long story short, what I learned was that you should really just use a piece of plywood going all the way up to the entrance. It's so much more smooth for the bees and for you. But I got a chance to watch the bees. And while we were seemingly endlessly waiting for the bees, we spotted a bee over on these flowers right next to the garden hive, and it was really nice just watching her for a while. I get the impression, leave me a comment if I'm off, but I got the impression that this was an older bee who was maybe nearing the end of her life. She was moving pretty slowly. She didn't seem very focused or attentive to what she was doing, but it was just neat to have such a close-up view. And then, of course, I got to have a close-up view of my June bug. So finally, after more waiting, it seemed like everybody was home, minus just a few bees. So I was able to remove the stick and remove the box and officially welcome the garden hive to the apiary. Now, if you saw last week's video talking about the update from each of the hives, I mentioned that this is my very feisty hive, so you can certainly bet that filming transferring over the swarm was the last time that I wore shorts around this hive when I was getting into it. When I'm not getting into the hive, like now, they're totally fine. I've been hearing them calmly buzz over my head going to collect pollen and nectar, but as soon as I get in there, man, they actually were a little better in last week's inspection, but these are my feisty girls. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.